We've talked about the functional elements. Robert's done a great job of the substance of these types of things. We've heard from many today about the types of things it takes to lead, especially during difficult and divisive times. And we really spent a lot of time talking about culture shaping, so that it's not just like, oh, the immediacy of the time, but that we've already shaped the culture of civility around how do we react and respond to divisive and difficult times. I think Mayor Andewig gave a great example of that. Here at the Ray Center, we work from early childhood to the corporate community and public service arena. We work on creating cultures of excellence and civility in the workplace and the public service. We work with state legislative leaders in all 50 states, U.S. territories, Canada, and Mexico on these things. And we work with municipalities as well. And so what I wanted to do today was just give you a sense of what we're trying to do and what you can do to maybe make a difference. Our hope is, for those of you that may have become on this call now, this was the intro from earlier this morning, and I've mentioned this, but I want to reiterate, through all of the things that you presented, we really want you to think about what can I do better or differently, because I've invested my time in this day to hear these speakers and hear these strategies and tools. We will be sending a follow-up email that will have links to everything from the day, including the PowerPoints. But I want you to think as we go through each of the items that I'm going to touch base with you on, what are things here that I could do to elevate in my leadership? We talk and try to simplify things down, and it's much more complex than this. It may be simple, but not easy. And what is needed to create a culture of civility? It takes connection, the intentionality, as Robert said on the other areas, the intentionality of relationship building, especially with those who are new and different. It takes ground rules for engagement. We've heard about some of that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. How do we shape our ground rules for engagement, or what will it take for us to do our best work and treat each other with care and respect? We like to talk about carefrontation rather than confrontation. Carefrontation is that, we care so much about our city that we want to address this difficult topic together so that our city can become more robust and have an either greater future for our citizens. And then we talk about self-awareness. Where am I as a leader? And with that comes an accountability of collective responsibility. Those are the things that we want to touch base with you today. So we're going to start out on connection. And when we talk about connection, we talk about the opportunity to build from surface to substance. What does it take for us to go from a surface level engagement? You see somebody in the grocery store and they say, hey, I really need to have the pothole fixed on my street, or the snowplow, if you're in the northern climate like us, came by and knocked my mailbox off. Who's going to take care of that for me? You're dealing with those on a very surface level. What does it take to get to the substance, which is what Kelly was talking about, of how do you get to the substance of why do you believe and feel the way you want to do? Each of us have an opportunity to take intentionality to build relationships with people that are new and different. And at least most every one of the municipal leaders that I've worked with, and now one of the reasons they got into this is because they care so much about their community and the people. So it should be easy, but it's not in today's environment to do this. I want to give you a video here that gives you an example of what it can look like to form a relationship with somebody that is different in their thoughts or feelings from you.
Well, a friend of mine passed away, and she was all about reconciliation, always about reaching out to people and to unlikely people. When she passed away, I wanted to do something to honor her. And I thought, who would be the most unlikely person on the planet that I would reach out to? And it was Bob.
I'm the president and CEO of the Family Leader. And our mission statement is to strengthen families by inspiring Christ-like leadership in the home, the church, and government.
I'm the executive director at One Iowa, which is the state's largest lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender organization. I've been an activist and an advocate and sometimes an agitator in this movement for almost 30 years.
Well, Donna and I, we see the world very differently. In our view on marriage, on sexuality, and probably on a lot of other issues.
I guess you'd have to say that my impression of Bob was not only he was the opposition, he was the enemy.
I've probably made statements about her and her organization in the press. She's probably made statements about me and my organization in the press. We weren't natural allies. We weren't natural coffee buddies. And so she emailed the Family Leader and said, hey, I talked to Bob, and Bob said he'd be willing to do coffee. let me know a good time and date. And so they shared that email with me like, is this true? I mean, is this real? And I said, yeah, it's real, but I never thought she'd follow up on it.
I never thought that he would respond.
And so we set a date to have coffee.
And that was the beginning of this amazing journey. I remember walking in just being very nervous. I had no idea what to expect, none at all.
Well, you know, the skeptic in me thought she would have an agenda, and she probably thought I might have an agenda. But as soon as we sat down, I thought, she doesn't have an agenda. She just wants to get to know who I am. And that really compelled me to say, I should want to get to know who she is.
I think when people have the courage to show you who they are, something happens. And so what surprised me about Bob was his humanity. He's an incredible dad. I also found him to be really funny, and I didn't expect that at all. But we laugh a lot.
Donna's a very good person. She's a passionate person. She has advocated for her issues tirelessly for over 3 decades. So regardless if I agree or disagree with her on the issues, I have a tremendous respect for her.
For a long time, I've been really tired of the hate and the aggression and the kind of snarkiness. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can fight the good fight in the court of public opinion, but we don't have to hurt each other. That's, I think, the big takeaway for me. We don't have to hurt each other, because when we do that, we're hurting ourselves. We get coffee about once every couple of months.
And I think with Donna, her and I readily assessed that we have a lot of common interest. We have some common ground. The only regret in all of that is that I wasn't the one to ask her out for coffee. And she's the one who asked me out. And I'm glad she did, but I kind of feel like I should have.
What surprised me was not that he liked me. I thought, yeah, he'd like me. What surprised me was I really liked him.
It hasn't changed my beliefs. It may have changed my approach, because when we do put out a press release, when we do make a public statement, many times I think, I wonder how Donna will view this.
Here's the deal. If Bob and I can have coffee, if we can tell stories and laugh and get to know each other, if we can like each other, then I think almost anyone can find that person in their life, and maybe they can reach out their hand and invite them in.
Well, that's a Mutual of Omaha aha moment. It was filmed in 2015, and a 30-second clip of that ran in a 2016 Super Bowl ad. We, in our training and work, talk about other study, self-study, pause, reflection, and action. And this is a great other study of people that would be very vastly different on the spectrum of ideology. They were having confrontation, but they did demonstrate to all of us how you can break through those barriers. One of the things that I want to give you a fast forward on that relationship took place for years. Donna then contracted cancer and has passed away. And prior to her passing, Donna and her wife asked Bob to give the eulogy at the Celebration of Life service, which he gave eloquent remarks around the concept of civility and what he had hoped, and Donna had hoped their relationship would elevate for people, that you can be different. You can have different theories and philosophies about things, but that you can find common ground. So some of the reflections that we have on that is, when I talk about this, think for yourself, who would be the most unlikely person for you to reach out to? Could you reach out? Would you follow up? And try to get together with them without an agenda, just to touch base, to find common ground. Because we can disagree without being disagreeable, but it's rooted foundationally in our relationships. Without relationships, that becomes even more difficult. Other study I like to point out is this picture in the upper left is former Governor Robert E. Ray. This is a different era, a different time. He was governor in Iowa from 1969 to 1983. He's most known for his refugee relocation efforts of the Southeast Asians coming out of the Vietnam War. But he also, in his role as governor, After President Nixon opened China. Remember, the Chinese had been our enemy and there had been no diplomatic relations for over 40 years. When Nixon opened China, the next plane from the US had a delegation of governors and spouses, and Governor Ray was on that delegation, and he invited the Chinese nationals to come to Iowa when their planned trip was coming to the United States. They were scheduled for Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles, and they made a stop to Iowa. The reason I show this photo is because Governor Ray at the Capitol in a back side hallway had a ping pong table. He used ping pong with his staff members to reduce stress. He was a good ping pong player, and he was very competitive. But he also played with every legislator every year at least once. And in Iowa, that's 150 legislators. And they played ping pong by the rules of ping pong, but also by the rules that you couldn't talk about state budget, state policy, executive, legislative, judicial. He used it as a way to build relationships with those that he would have contact and work with. Now, this particular picture is the only time the ping pong table was moved into the conference room. For when the Chinese nationals arrived in Iowa, the first thing Governor Ray did was bring him into the conference room, and they played ping pong for 2 hours. They formed relationship over a common bond before they started talking about opportunities for international trade and agricultural trade and things of that nature. That relationship building also had an impact on a young Iowa legislator who became governor of the state of Iowa and then was appointed to be ambassador to China during the Trump administration for the United States. And interestingly enough, he formed a 35 plus year relationship now with a Chinese national who was the kind of a county government level official at the time they first met. And that gentleman's name is Xi Jinping, the president of China. In fact, when the president of China was here just a week or so ago, Ambassador Branstad and Iowa delegation were out there having dinner with him. Amongst all the China challenges that we have with China, you have to ask, would you not rather have someone be in a role of that level of diplomacy that had a 30-year relationship rather than someone that did not have relationship? So my point in the question that I have to you as we think about relationship building is, who is it that you could intentionally connect with? Is there somebody on the council, somebody in the community? You could reach out and just say, hey, I'd like to get to know you better. Not about a particular issue. And I know time is valuable, but the investment of time to build relationship pays vast, vast dividends. The other thing I would encourage all of you that are already serving is, what are you doing intentionally to build relationships within your council and mayor and the staff to learn about each other in ways that are significant? So as you tackle the tough issues, that you can come at those with the opportunity and the knowledge that you're all working together for the betterment of the community. The second thing I want to touch base with you on is ground rules for engagement. How do we set boundaries for how we're going to work together? This actually happens to be a piece that we use in a lot of our work. Asking a question of a group: what will it take for us to do our best work and treat each other with care and respect? This is one that we actually did in a municipal engagement. You've heard several of these concepts today: listening actively, respecting each other in the process. When Mayor Andewig was speaking earlier today, and we discussed the DART regional governance with mayors from 19 communities and business leaders, all of whom knew each other. We started that meeting with a relationship building, go around the room, who you were, what are you representing, and something that others in the room didn't know about you. And then we spent time forming the compact of what it was going to take for us to do our best work and treat each other with care and respect. And then they came to an agreement that we would all abide by this, strive to abide by this, and hold ourselves and each other accountable. So there's many different templates you can use for this in the public arena. We found these to be very helpful in setting standards for community forums. Many communities, the Chamber of Commerce holds public forums with the city council, possibly school board, county board of supervisors, legislative leaders. In many communities, those are going by the wayside because of the difficulty of not being able to have those in civil dialogue and discourse. Setting the ground rules for that, and just we'll make a note, Hillary, to be sure and put our social respect for meeting moderators and effective rules for meeting in the assets of the things to go out for the participants later on. My point is, you should be thinking about how you can use the identification. Robert just mentioned this when you talk about codes of conduct, and if you're looking at things. Mayor Andewig mentioned what he states at the Urbandale City Council meeting, and each committee, the school boards in Urbandale use this as well. Urbandale is a national leader and character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In conducting our work, we expect that all participants will act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. That'll be added into your chat and also sent out later. It's a type of template that the mayor, the voice of authority in the council chamber, states that at the beginning and then has a responsibility of holding people accountable. And on the nights when there's, in the work sessions where there's not anything controversial, this is not an issue. But the fact that it's done at every meeting sets the tone and the template at those meetings when you do have 80 parents representing 2 soccer clubs coming in with passion and wanting to share their thoughts. So again, this is a type of template. We also heard from Clarence about pledges and the opportunities for setting the ground rules for pledges. I did want to share in West Virginia, Evan Jenkins is a former Supreme Court justice there. He works for the United States Chamber of Commerce right now. And when he was Supreme Court justice, they actually changed the oath of office for lawyers in West Virginia. And they did this because of the incivility they were seeing between lawyers in each other in the courtroom, with judges, even with their clients. So that language in red, that I will conduct myself with integrity, dignity, and civility, and show respect toward judges, court staff, clients, fellow professionals, and all other persons, was added into the oath of office for lawyers. What does that look like in a city, potentially, in a municipality, where you lay out within your city the constructs of how we're going to do business? I'm not suggesting it has to be an oath as a part of the oath of office. I am suggesting that it sets out the constraints and the expectations of how we want to work together, something that we also heard from Kelly as well. The next thing I want to touch base on is carefrontation. We talk about carefrontation rather than confrontation. Again, as you see there, we go after the problems that we're working with, trying to resolve, not the people. And that's sometimes difficult to separate because we all are part of the human condition. But you really, in your role in the public service, need to be focused on what are the problems, not the people. And when there is an issue, you do have to address it. I think we all know that if we think we've got an issue boiling up and we think it'll just might go away, it tends not to go away. We'll talk a little bit about language that you can use and seeking win-win. I want, you want, and we could. And then owning up to our mistakes and missteps, and we've heard that earlier today too. One of the things I think is very helpful in the public arena, and in fact in all communication, is our ability to think through the communication before we have it. Who are we talking with, and how are we best going to respect them in doing that? Public forum is a little different than the council meeting itself. There's different rules of engagement for that. As Robert was talking about, how long a time do people have to speak and their public input? That's not a response and reaction time. That's more of a public forum. So understanding that. I think one of the things that I really want you to understand about this slide that is really important in our communication is trying to keep in mind, what do you want to avoid in your communication and conversation, as much as you think about what do I want to achieve. Like, I want to achieve this issue. I want to get this issue resolved. But if in resolving this issue, I create a fracture in our community that is very deep and wide and will take a decade to replace and repair, is that a good thing? Or does that mean we're not done yet and we still need to do something that we can get that greater good element focused on? So thinking through your own communication and how that plays out, and of course, when and where. Public chastisement never works very well for any of us. I believe in the public praise and the private critique. For those of you that are in city council, whether you're working with staff or team members, when's the appropriate time to have the conversation about accountability on something that they might not have fulfilled an expectation? Probably better privately than doing it in a call down in front of a public meeting. Those are things that are really fuels and lubricants for civility. One of the things I also talk about, I don't have a slide on this, is civil language. When you think of your engagement in the municipal arena, are you hearing words like please, thank you, excuse me, I'm sorry, forgive me? And if you're not, try it for the next 10 days. What you'll find is those words are somewhat contagious, and the more you use those civil lubricant words, the more often you'll hear them, and it sets communication and context. We talked earlier, and Miranda was very good about this, even in the most difficult times, you really need to seek to understand. First, there's your understanding yourself, like this is an unfathomable, tragic event, and I'm just at a loss with this, and even understanding myself. So you need to seek to understand yourself at all times. You really need to seek to understand others. I love the be curious, not furious elements. Be curious, not judgmental. Ask questions. Find out why people are feeling the passion that they feel about issues so that you can better understand your reaction to their passion around any issues. We talk a lot about making sure that you're using verify and clarify statements in your communication. From my point of view, this is what you're saying. I understand this to mean what you're intending. Those are really good conversational, so that repeat and reflex really helps to clarify on both sides what you're saying. We talk a lot about what to avoid and use, and certainly in heated engagements. Try and avoid the you statements. You're always wrong. You always disrupt our meetings. You're never on time. Anytime that's said to any of us, as you know, you get defensive. I get defensive. You can get the same element of using I statements. I think we'd be better off if we could make sure that in our compact, we said we were all going to do our best to be here and start on time, and that doesn't seem to be happening. What can we do better to make sure that we're starting our meetings on time and all engaged in the agenda, rather than you're never on time and you're never engaged with the agenda, because that puts people on the spot and defensive. And you'll find that you get the same outcome regardless of which approach you use. But on the you statements, the outcome really brings a negative context because it brings a defensiveness and it breaks down relationship and raises barriers. The other thing we talk about a lot in our municipal arena is it seems like everything's a negotiation. You're negotiating roles, goals, and strategies. When you're first elected, we worked with a municipality that just defining the fact that city council members who had police scanners in their home were not the people that should be responding to the accident scene and asking questions. That's not the role of a council member. That's the role of the police department within the council. So even understanding what is my role as a council member and a mayor, because those differ from what the role is even of a city manager or department head. What are the goals we're trying to achieve? A lot of work we do with municipalities is on their goal identification and setting strategic vision for the community. And when there's alignment on that, what are we trying to achieve here? What we found is that that even transitions with the turnover in councils and mayors that you have in communities, because if it's done in the right way and it has community-based input, you've identified the big goals that you want to go after in your community. We want this kind of growth, and that's going to require this level of fire support, this level of police support. This is what the library should be working on. This is how our street maintenance and repair and sewer repair should look like. And then you negotiate the strategy. How can we get it done? So it really is thinking through your negotiation process and communication. We like to talk a lot about the win-win. I want, you want, we could. And when we talk about this, finding that common ground of where can we best achieve all that we want. In that I want, you want, we could, it's important to also identify what your non-negotiables are. I'll give you an example because I am familiar with this with the Urbandale soccer clubs that Miranda was talking about. There was a facilitation with them to try and have them reach agreement on how they would work together. They did a compact of how that they would be candid with each other in their conversation. And what was determined in the very first meeting was that both of them had a non-negotiable that was at direct conflict with the other. One club wanted to maintain and protect the space that they had been practicing and playing on for decades and been upgrading themselves. The other club said it wouldn't be resolved unless they got that some of that space to use. The original club said they wouldn't resolve it if the club got that space. So then it had to go to the elevation of the governing board, which was the city council and the mayor, and it became a very divisive issue. So if you think about the communication skills necessary for carefrontation, where we care enough about each other and our community and our desire for service to achieve the best possible outcome, that helps us when we use the right communication language. There's two pieces of self-awareness that I want you to think about in your leadership. And that is in every engagement and every community, we have leaders, participants, and detractors. Those leaders are those, many of you, and I'm sure probably all of you on this call, who are trying to learn and what you can do to be better in your advocacy, not just on the issues, but how you do it with civility, or you would not have invested your time in this today. You'll have some in your community that are just participants. They may show up to a public meeting, they may come to a council meeting, but they're not engaging and moving that forward. And I think one of the challenges we have is how do you get the voice of everybody heard, including voices of people that are detractors? And how do you manage through the leadership when you have detractors in your community that detract from the process with incivility? And how do we try to keep that groundswell of support of the expectation is we'll go after the tough issues, but we will not do it in a detrimental way to our community. So it's important to self-reflect on this and also how you work with others. The last piece in self-awareness is something that really comes to our collective responsibility in leadership at any time. And many municipalities do this well, and others are more challenged because you're so busy. There's so much going on. You've got the real world happening. You've got family, outside activities, and then this service that you're providing to the community. And things just move very quickly, lots of issues, and you've got a professional staff to help you. But are you taking time in your work sessions? A 20-minute organizational audit conversation. Hey, if we were to think about the last month and our interactions with the public, what would we stop, start, continue, or improve? If we were to do something better or differently than we've done in the last year, what would be the things we do? Well, maybe we could, we're getting the pressure on the community engagement time. Rather than narrowing that window, maybe we could add 2 community forums and give people a voice of where they could come. Sometimes those types of things where you actually take a reflection of what are the things we're doing well and what are the things we want to do better are really exceptional opportunities for you to also build relationship and communicate clearly with each other. So again, the focus that we bring around the opportunity for you to have tools and strategies to create that culture of civility that's intentional and ongoing, this never ends, deals with connections, ground rules, confrontation, and self-awareness. I've got one last video that I want to show you that took place between 2 public figures in a race for the governor's office in Utah. And I want you to think about, as you listen to this, what level of connection did they have to have? What ground rules had to be in place? How they approached this from a confrontation standpoint? And what did their own self-awareness and accountability have to take place to lead to this video being made?
I'm Chris Peterson.
And I'm Spencer Cox.
We are currently in the final days of campaigning against each other to be your next governor.
And while I think you should vote for me,
Yeah, but really you should vote for me.
there are some things we both agree on.
We can debate issues without degrading each other's character.
We can disagree without hating each other.
And win or lose in Utah, we work together.
So let's show the country that there's a better way.
My name's Chris Peterson.
And I'm Spencer Cox.
And
we approve this message.
Love to show that as an example of those 2 candidates at the time. That was released within a couple of weeks of the end of the election cycle. It was done because there were third-party entities that had gotten engaged that were doing negative, tearing down, and demeaning things. And they came together because they had a connection, that they wanted to establish the ground rules of how they felt the campaigning should go. They cared deeply enough about Utah beyond the fact of how these negative ads were going. And they were aware that they believed that if they came out with a joint message, that they could disagree, but still be civil and care about Utah, that they could make a statement. Now, as I move forward, it's now Governor Cox in Utah, and he has a series of pieces through the National Governors Association he's done with the governor in Colorado about their differences. Who has the best skiing, who has the best trout streams, who has the best tourism, but what can they agree on? And so I give you that as context, that even in differences, even in heightened battles, going from challenges with a soccer club in your community to elevated leadership that Clarence was talking about today, and where we're seeing this really some hateful and violent things, that if we could focus on intentionally building connection, ground rules, confrontation, and self-awareness, along with collective responsibility, that you can move the needle. So I'm hopeful that some of these resources might be helpful to you as tools and strategy. We will be providing this in an after follow-up from the summit. And if you've got any further questions around this, we're all accessible, any of us that you've heard presenting today, to dive deeper into this. So again, I want to thank you on behalf of our work at the Ray Center and the Center for Public Democracy at Drake.